In a small village tucked beneath the shadow of towering pine-covered hills, life moved at its own quiet pace. The roads were narrow, the rooftops dusted with moss, and the air often carried the earthy scent of leaves and wood smoke. It was the kind of place where stories passed through generations like heirlooms. Tales of spirits in the forest, talking animals, and ancient friendships between humans and nature. Most adults rolled their eyes at these stories, but children listened with wide eyes and wild imaginations. One of those children was 8-year-old Anya. She lived with her grandmother in a small cottage at the edge of the woods. Her parents had moved to the city for work, but Anya had begged to stay behind, not because she didn't love them, but because she loved the forest more. Every morning, she would grab her sketchbook, a pencil, and sometimes a piece of bread, and head just far enough into the trees to feel like she was in a different world. Anya wasn't reckless. Her grandmother had taught her to respect the forest, to never pick flowers without reason, to never throw stones, and always to say thank you when taking anything from nature. The woods, her grandmother always said, were alive, and if you listened closely, they whispered back. That morning, the fog hung low and heavy. The trees stood like silent giants, their trunks disappearing into the mist. Anya followed the same path she always did, a narrow dirt trail where mushrooms grew like tiny umbrellas and birds sang from the branches above. She stopped near her favorite tree, an old birch with a split trunk, and sat down to sketch the shapes she saw in the mist. That's when she noticed something strange. At first, it was only a shadow, moving slowly between the trees. She thought it might be a deer. They sometimes wandered close if you stayed very still. But as the figure moved closer, her heart began to race. It was no deer. It was larger, heavier, moving with a strange rhythm, not quite steady. Then the fog shifted, and she saw it clearly. A wolf, dark, with thick fur and amber eyes. It stood still, not growling, not baring teeth, just staring. Its front leg was lifted, trembling. There was blood on the ground. And then, against everything she thought she knew, the wolf took a step toward her. Anya's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears. Her fingers tightened around her sketchbook, and for a second, she thought about running. Every story she had ever heard about wolves rushed to the front of her mind. Fierce hunters, sharp teeth, danger in the dark. But something about this wolf was different. It wasn't snarling. It wasn't chasing. It was waiting. The wolf limped closer, its injured leg trembling with each careful step. It stopped a few feet away, lowering itself to the ground with a soft grunt, eyes never leaving hers. Anya couldn't move. She had never been this close to a wild animal before. She could see the dampness of its nose, the matted fur around its shoulders, and most of all, the deep gash on its leg where something shiny and sharp was lodged. It looked like a piece of metal, maybe from a trap or some broken fence. For a long moment, nothing happened. The forest around them was completely still, as if even the trees were holding their breath. Then the wolf did something she couldn't explain. It bowed its head slightly and let out a low, almost pleading whimper. It wasn't threatening her. It wasn't acting like a predator. It was asking. Anya slowly set her sketchbook down, her hands trembling as she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of cloth, her lunch napkin, one her grandmother had embroidered with small red flowers. Carefully, keeping her eyes on the wolf, she stepped forward. She moved like someone walking through a dream, half terrified, half determined. The wolf didn't move away. It didn't growl or flinch. It just watched her, as if it had made a choice and was trusting her to follow through. Kneeling beside the animal, Anya whispered softly, though she didn't know why. Maybe it was to calm herself. Maybe it was to calm the wolf. Gently, she wrapped the cloth around its leg, trying to stop the bleeding. The metal shard looked terrible, but with careful fingers, she managed to slide it out. The wolf jerked slightly but didn't attack. Instead, it let out a long breath, almost like relief. When she was done, Anya sat back, unsure what would happen next. The wolf looked at her one last time, then turned, limping into the mist. She didn't know it yet, but everything in her life had just changed. Anya sat there for a long time, staring at the spot where the wolf had disappeared into the fog. The quiet of the forest seemed overwhelming now, as if the trees themselves were waiting for her to understand something. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Had she really just helped a wolf? A wild, dangerous animal. The thought seemed impossible, but the reality of it was undeniable. Her fingers were still trembling from the touch of the wolf's fur, from the moment when it had let her help. But what surprised her most was the feeling of trust she had felt in those amber eyes. It wasn't fear. It wasn't aggression. It was a strange kind of quiet pleading, an animal reaching out, asking for something beyond survival, something human. Anya stood up slowly, brushing the dirt and leaves off her skirt, but she didn't feel the cold or the weight of the day. Instead, there was only a rush of questions flooding her mind. How had the wolf been hurt? Why had it come to her? Was it looking for help, or had it been hoping for something else? And most importantly, would it return? With every step she took back toward the cottage, the world around her seemed different. The forest no longer felt like just a place to wander, to draw pictures of deer and rabbits. It had become something else entirely, a living, breathing world with its own secrets and stories, and maybe, just maybe, a world where humans and animals could connect in ways she never imagined. When she reached her grandmother's cottage, she opened the door carefully. The warm scent of bread and herbs filled the small kitchen, and Anya's grandmother, who was hunched over a bowl of dough, looked up. Her face was weathered and wise, her eyes soft but sharp with experience. She saw the look on Anya's face, and her hand stilled. "What is it, child?" her grandmother asked, her voice soft but knowing. Anya didn't know how to explain what had happened. She couldn't find the words for the quiet trust she felt in the wolf's eyes, or the strange sense that something powerful and important had just occurred. Instead, she simply said, "I think the forest needs us, Grandma." Her grandmother didn't answer right away. She just nodded as though she had known this day would come. "The forest always remembers," she said quietly. Anya didn't fully understand what that meant, but she had a feeling she would learn soon enough. The next few days passed in a strange blur for Anya. Her thoughts kept returning to the wolf, to its amber eyes, its silent plea, and the way it had trusted her when it had no reason to. It was a feeling that clung to her, like a dream she couldn't shake off. But life in the village went on, and for everyone else, it was just another quiet week. That was until word of Anya's encounter began to spread. At first, it was just a whisper here and there. "Did you hear? Little Anya helped a wolf." Some people chuckled, assuming it was another one of her wild imaginings. Others dismissed it as a tall tale, like the stories her grandmother often told about the forest's magic. But then, when Anya's grandmother mentioned the encounter to a few neighbors, the story quickly caught fire. By the time Mr. Radu, the local biology teacher, heard about it, he was intrigued. He had always been a bit of an outsider in the village, a man of science in a place steeped in folklore and myth. But even he knew the stories of wild animals that had wandered too close to human settlements. What he didn't expect was for someone to claim that a wolf, a creature known for its ferocity, had willingly sought help from a child. It was unlike anything he had ever heard of before. Without hesitation, Mr. Radu made the decision to reach out to a wildlife institute in the nearest city. He wasn't sure what he was hoping to find, but something about the situation gnawed at him. The behavior of the wolf wasn't typical. No wolf, especially not a wild one, would approach a human in need of help unless it was desperate. Meanwhile, Anya went about her days with a quiet sense of unease. The forest still called to her, but now there was a new weight to it, the knowledge that the wolves might be watching, waiting. Her grandmother had always said the forest had a way of remembering, but now Anya wondered if it was the forest itself that had decided to remember her. When Mr. Radu came to visit, he was polite but insistent. He asked her questions, studied the path Anya had taken that morning, and listened carefully as she explained every detail of her encounter with the wolf. After he left, he told her grandmother, "There's something extraordinary about this. I need to investigate further." Anya didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of something far bigger than she could have imagined. 2 days later, Anya was sitting near the edge of the forest, her sketchbook in her lap, when she felt a shift in the air. a strange kind of stillness that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The forest, which had always been her quiet companion, now felt different, as if it was holding its breath. She looked up, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. Then, from the mist that clung to the forest floor, came a movement. It was slow at first, almost imperceptible, but as the figure drew closer, Anya's heart skipped a beat. It was the wolf, the same dark, wounded creature. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, just within the trees, stood a small pack of wolves. 4 in total, their fur blending with the shadows, their eyes gleaming with silent curiosity. Anya's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen wolves in such close proximity before, not like this, not in the wild. The injured wolf stepped forward, its limp more pronounced than before, but it seemed determined. Its amber eyes locked onto Anya's as it came closer, a soft whimper escaping its throat. There was no aggression, no growling. It was the same quiet, almost pleading look from before. But this time, the message felt even more urgent. Anya's fingers tightened around the edge of her sketchbook as she stood up, feeling a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She had helped this wolf once, but now, with the entire pack standing behind it, she wasn't sure what to do. The pack didn't move. They simply watched her, waiting. Anya could feel the weight of their gaze, the intelligence behind their eyes. It wasn't just the wounded wolf that had come seeking help. It was all of them. Before she could decide what to do next, a low voice broke the silence. Anya. It was Mr. Radu. He had arrived quietly, as he always did, but now his voice was firm with purpose. He had been tracking the wolves from a distance, gathering evidence, and recording their behavior. Seeing Anya face to face with the pack was the moment he'd been waiting for. He quickly stepped forward, but his approach was slow and non-threatening. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. "They've come for help, just like the others. We need to understand why." Anya looked at him, then back at the wolves. The forest had spoken, and now it was up to them to listen. Over the next few weeks, the quiet village and its surrounding forest became the center of an unexpected scientific investigation. Mr. Radu, along with researchers from the Wildlife Institute, set up cameras and tracking devices to monitor the wolf pack. They had no idea what they were about to uncover, but one thing was clear: this was no ordinary pack. The injured wolf, now known to the team as Alpha, continued to approach Anya. Every time it returned, it brought a few members of its pack with it. They stayed in the shadows, observing from a distance, but never advancing too far. Alpha's behavior was puzzling. It didn't seem to be desperate for food, nor was it acting out of fear. The wolf was actively seeking help, and not just for itself, but for its pack. What baffled the scientists most was the trust Alpha placed in Anya. It wasn't just a survival instinct. It seemed to be a conscious decision. The wolf, despite its wild nature, had come to rely on the girl, and there was a connection between them that couldn't be ignored. The research team speculated that the pack might have experienced some form of trauma or loss that had altered their behavior. But what caused Alpha to seek out a human, and one so young? Anya's role was equally puzzling. Despite the common belief that wild animals avoid humans, this wolf actively sought her out, even when other humans were present. She wasn't a trained wildlife expert. She was just a child with a compassionate heart. The scientists couldn't explain it, but the footage from the cameras left little room for doubt. The bond between Anya and the wolf was undeniable. The pack's behavior began to shift too. Once they had been elusive, hiding deep within the forest. But after Alpha's interactions with Anya, the pack members grew bolder. They would come closer to the village, staying on the outskirts, as if they were testing the boundaries of their new relationship with humans. It was a slow process, but there was a marked difference in how the pack was behaving compared to other wolves in the region. As more data poured in, scientists started to entertain a radical theory. Could the wolves have developed a new understanding of humans, one that was based not on fear or aggression, but on trust? This idea challenged everything they had learned about wild animals and their relationships with humans. Anya didn't understand the science behind it all, but she knew one thing for sure: The forest had changed, and so had she. As the weeks turned into months, Anya's life began to intertwine more closely with the forest and its wolves. What had started as a single moment of quiet compassion had evolved into something far greater, an ongoing study of animal behavior that would change everything scientists thought they knew about human-wildlife relationships. The researchers, led by Mr. Radu, had been closely observing the wolves. They noticed that Alpha, the leader, had begun to exhibit behaviors never before seen in wild wolves. The pack would approach Anya in the early morning or late evening, lingering at the forest's edge as if waiting for her. Alpha would always be the first to approach, its eyes soft but intent, as if silently calling her to come closer. Anya had become a bridge between two worlds, the human world and the untamed wilderness. It wasn't just the wolf that had changed. She had changed too. Every time she encountered the pack, she felt a deepening connection to the forest, a sense of unity she couldn't quite explain. The more time she spent with the wolves, the more she began to understand them, not just as creatures of instinct, but as beings with emotions, needs, and even a form of intelligence that went beyond simple survival. One evening, Anya stood by the tree line, watching as the pack circled back into the forest. Alpha, now fully healed, lingered at the edge, turning to look at her one last time. She could feel the bond between them, a connection so strong it was almost tangible. The wolf didn't need to speak. Its eyes said everything, a deep gratitude, a silent promise, and an understanding that went beyond words. It was then that the scientists began to realize something profound. They had been studying animal behavior for decades, but what was happening in this forest was something entirely new. Wolves had long been seen as symbols of the wild, fierce, independent, and untamable. But these wolves, under Alpha's leadership, had shown an entirely different side. They weren't just surviving, they were learning, adapting, and even reaching out to humans in ways no one could have predicted. The idea that animals, especially predators like wolves, could form bonds with humans based on trust rather than fear was groundbreaking. For decades, researchers had focused on the idea of humans dominating nature. But what if the true power lay in understanding and respecting the wilderness and the creatures who lived there? Anya wasn't sure she fully understood all the science, but she knew one thing. The forest had become her teacher, and its lesson had changed her forever. She wasn't just a girl in a village anymore. She was a part of something bigger. As the months passed, the quiet village and the surrounding forest became more and more connected in ways that no one had anticipated. Anya's bond with the wolf pack was no longer just a curious tale whispered among villagers. It had become a living example of how human compassion could alter the course of nature itself. The pack, under Alpha's leadership, had learned to coexist with humans, and the village began to adapt to this new reality. Anya found herself becoming a local legend. People came from nearby towns, drawn by stories of the girl who had healed a wolf and forged a bond with an entire pack. They would ask her questions, but Anya didn't have answers. She couldn't explain the connection she felt with the wolves. She simply knew that it was real. Mr. Radu and his team published their findings, but even they struggled to define the phenomenon they had witnessed. Wolves, they explained, had always been known to form tight-knit social structures, but the level of trust between Alpha's pack and Anya was unlike anything they had studied before. The behavior didn't fit into any traditional model of predator-prey dynamics or human-wildlife interaction. It was something new, something groundbreaking. But the most profound discovery came from the wolves themselves. The pack, once elusive and wary of humans, began to play a role in the village's ecosystem. They helped control the population of smaller animals that had been causing problems in the nearby farmlands. The wolves didn't just coexist, they became guardians of the land. Their presence, rather than causing fear, brought a sense of balance to the community. Anya's grandmother, who had always known that the forest held more than just trees and animals, watched with quiet pride as the village and the wolves grew together. She often told Anya that the forest was a place of wisdom, a place where everything had its purpose if you only knew how to listen. One day, while sitting beneath her favorite birch tree, Anya felt the familiar weight of a wolf's gaze. She looked up and saw Alpha standing at the edge of the clearing, the rest of the pack just behind. The wolf's amber eyes met hers, and in that moment, Anya understood. The forest had always been alive. It had always been watching, waiting. And now, with the bond between her and the wolves, she had become part of its story, a story that would continue long after she was gone. The wolves had chosen her, not just for her kindness, but for her willingness to see the world differently. She had become a bridge between two worlds, one that would forever be intertwined with the pulse of the forest.